FBLA State Reporter. Thank you for joining us for today's Fly session. We appreciate the many individuals and organizations who support Virginia FBLA by sponsoring our activities and programs, including Germanna Region FBLA, Margaret Gartman in Suffolk, and Marsh Propane in Abingdon. During today's session, you can use the chat feature to comment and ask questions that will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Today's speakers are no strangers to the future business leaders of America, Phi Beta Lambda. Brian Ferrell is a serial entrepreneur and the owner of Factor 110, Destination Oklahoma, 110 Events, Blue Circle Productions, and Scissortail Gifts. Before starting Factor 110, he served as the National FBLA-PBL Communications and Publications Manager. Brian has been a member of FBLA-PBL since 1996 and served as PBL National President and on the Board of Directors in 2002 to 2003. He is currently a board member for the Virginia FBLA-PBL Foundation. Laura Morgan has been an active member of FBLA-PBL since 1997 and currently serves as the National FBLA-PBL Professional Division Secretary-Treasurer. She served as a 6-time Oklahoma FBLA-PBL State Officer and as PBL Mountain Plains Region Vice President. Prior to joining Factor 110 as Event and Destination Manager, Laura was the National FBLA-PBL Communications and Publications Manager. I am pleased to welcome Brian Ferrell and Laura Morgan.
Well, wonderful. As you can see, Laura's journey and mine have intertwined quite a bit in life. We actually met when we were in FBLA and PBL, and we both have served in a lot of different roles and capacities, have held the same job at a couple different companies, actually. So she's no stranger to my life or our company, but she's been working behind the scenes over the past 20-some days as part of the Fly program as well. So we'd like to welcome you into our dining room here at our Factor 110 studio, where we saw many of you on Friday last week. So we're gonna go through some dining and dinner etiquette. It's always a great refresher, even for me, to go through this program. I would like to thank Linda Morgan, who is on our call today, for providing us with her presentation that she taught and used in our officer trainings many, many years ago. And so it's a wonderful tool. And again, everything that is in that presentation, no matter the time, is still so relevant even today. So as we welcome you into our facility here, we're gonna have you all take a seat right here at the head of the table. But as you think about going to dinner, or whether this is a formal dinner at somebody's house or a nice restaurant, you may be invited to a job interview that requires some dining at a restaurant, some things that you can kind of think about. So you should definitely call ahead when possible. So if you're running late or early, just always nice to reconfirm that reservation. If someone's meeting you, you should always tell the dining room host, oh, I can go ahead and be seated, or I could wait to be seated. But if I'm gonna go ahead and be seated, let them know that Laura is gonna be joining me a little bit later, and my name is Brian, and that way that host can go ahead and make that note and properly seat them at the right table without running them all over the restaurant. We've all been there before, to trying to find the right table. If you're running late, you definitely call the restaurant and let them know. Also make sure you're in communication with your guests as well if you are running late. Women should be seated first, followed by men, and the senior woman should always take the first seat. So I'm gonna come around here and we're gonna go ahead and seat Laura at the table here in her seat.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. So again, you can just gently pull out that chair for that person and always seat a lady first. And then I can take my seat over here. And you don't need to pull the seat out far. You're just making that nice little gesture for her to be seated there. So now that we're seated, and especially kind of as FBLA members, as you're kind of networking with different groups, or if you're a state officer team, you're often maybe dining together or have some special guests. I think one of the most important things that we've taken away from this presentation is, try not to clump. How do you kind of mix up so you're not just seated next to somebody you always sit next to, but divide it up a little bit more, especially if you're hosting other guests as well. We see that a lot still, I think, in our company or other places too. People tend to sit next to people they know and not necessarily want to get out of their comfort zone a little bit.
And that's actually a good tip, not just for dining, but if you're at a board meeting or at a conference, when you kind of see, oh, here's a group of people that they're seating or they're seated and you don't have an assigned seat, go introduce yourselves. You never know who you're going to meet. I think one of the first times I met Brian actually was at a PBL conference where I think he was sitting with some people from Kansas, but he got up and came over and introduced himself to our delegation from Oklahoma. So it's always nice to kind of make those connections, and you never know what conversations you'll get to have rather than just the same ones that you always have with the same people.
Very good. You want to take the next couple ones since they're kind of in your realm?
Sure. One thing, and this is always a tricky one for me, is your purse, if you're carrying a purse, so this is mostly for ladies. Men, if you happen to have a bag with you, should never go on the table for any reason. If you need to get something out of it, it should be in the floor. If there happens to be an empty chair, you can place it there if you need to look for something, but never put your purse or your bag on the table. That's just never a good idea. If you do need to have something, say you're taking notes because it's a business dinner and you need to have some information, it is fine to take a notebook or a pen out of your purse and just set them to the side. Don't start shifting all the dishes around and moving things, making a big production. Just kind of find an empty spot or scoot things a little bit and just lay that there until you need it. And then this one is one that you see a lot more now than back when we used to watch this presentation over the years as officers. Cell phones should never be put on the table. It's okay to have them in your purse, in your bag, in your pocket. Number one, always put them on silent, because I'm sure you've all been in a restaurant trying to have a conversation and you start hearing somebody's cell phone ring, or you hear the text message notification go off, and it can just be distracting. So always keep that cell phone put away. If you're expecting a call, for example, maybe you have a family member who's having a medical emergency, or if for some of our older participants, if you have children that someone's watching, if you think you might get a message that would be urgent, you can place it, like I said, in the floor on your bag, your purse, where you can kind of see the screen, but don't constantly be looking at it, because that's disrespectful. If Brian's trying to tell me a story and I'm constantly looking down at my phone or trying to see what's going on. If you have some kind of urgent situation going on, tell your dinner companion, I just want to let you know now, I have a relative who's, say, having an operation, if I get a message, I may need to step out for a moment. That way they're aware, so that it's not as abrupt if that situation does occur.
No, and again, like when Mr. Martin said last week or 2 weeks ago about job interviewing, go ahead and just leave the cell phone in your car. Don't take that temptation in there with you, or that distraction. So if this is a dinner interview and we're interviewing you at a dinner, and sometimes we've done that before. We've taken our potential guest or potential client out for dinner. And so we're looking, we're not only are you looking to us as to what's going on, or do I want to work for them, but we're also looking for you to see what your manners are like as well. So keep that in mind. You may be asked to do that. So one of the first things that after we've been seated and now we're ready to kind of establish our role or relationship here at the dinner table, the first thing is the napkin. So as soon as we're seated, the first thing you should do is go ahead and take your napkin and place it in your seat. So traditionally, it's located here at the left side of your plate. Sometimes, you could see it in your coffee cup or your water goblet. Some places have moved away from that. I have in particular, don't like that. Sometimes you may see it over your charger or someplace else around the table. So wherever it's located, you can simply take that out and place that on your lap. So the napkin, in this case, is folded in half already. And so you should have it placed with one fold kind of towards your knees there. So go ahead and place your napkin.
Well, I was going to give you a warning. Sometimes you see them and they're kind of fancy, and like Brian was talking about, they're folded into shapes and it's a little bit difficult to undo it. Just gently unfold it. Don't try to shake your napkin out like this. You always want to just, again, it's kind of like if you have to put the notepad, just don't make a production, just get your napkin. And like you can see as I was doing that, I messed up the fold on mine. So just gently.
So it already has a fold, placing the fold towards our body with the seam away, okay? We're not going to, even if we're having lobster or really good spaghetti and meatballs tonight, we're not going to go ahead and tuck this into our collar. We're not going to want to do that at all. Again, no production. And one of those tricky things to eat, and what you, if you need to leave the table, you can easily place your napkin again to the left or to the right of your plate. Sometimes it'll be placed, on the back of your seat, but again, a lot of times I would go ahead and just place it here. And don't be surprised if when you come back and it's refolded just so nicely there, because again, that's what they may do at that nice restaurant. So don't be surprised. No matter where you leave it, they may come back and make that look nice. So when your meal is over, again, we're going to fold our napkin loosely and just leave it again on the table, either here, right here in the center where our plate was, after this has all been removed, or just to the left of the plate there as well. Anything else you want to add on the napkin?
I don't think so. That covers most of it. Like I said, just the napkin's really something that's made to be, it's on the table and then it goes off, and it pretty much just shouldn't return to the table and gone. Just keep putting it back up. You don't wipe your mouth, let it there, and then put it back.
So we're going to come up to your place setting right now and go over kind of the layout, and then we'll come back and go through some unique things about each elements here. So at your place setting right now, you have a lot of different things that are going on. Not everything will have all of these, more, be less. So in this assumption of for this meal today that we're having, we can tell that we're soup course, have an entree, probably have a dinner, salad, and dessert. We didn't set all your plates for that particular, but we know that there's a bowl so that we know we're going to have a soup option. Again, napkins located to the left, forks are here to the left, not spoons. I always remember when I'm setting a place setting, fork, 4 letters, so that means left has 4 letters. Knife and spoon have 5, and so I always remember that right has 5 letters. So that's how I remember where things go in this setting. And then blades will always be placed inside towards your plate as well. So if we may actually see another knife or a steak setting, or the knife may be added during your course. So don't be surprised, just like that napkin, if you're at a fine restaurant, additional items may get added to your place setting as you use something up or something else is needed. Oh, you ordered soup? Well, all of a sudden they'll bring a soup spoon before maybe the soup arrives. So just don't be surprised if things change a little bit as you go. So we have our bread plate and our drinking assortment. So let's say that this is an iced tea and this is our water goblet. So those will be placed there, and then your coffee cup and your saucer there as well. So we know there's some cream here, our salt and pepper shaker there, a spoon for our dessert, our dinner knife, soup spoon, teaspoon, salad fork, and our dinner fork. And again, maybe you're having a 7 or 8 course meal. You may see additional things. Maybe as you move into adulthood, there could be a couple wine glasses here that, again, each course may have a different meal. We've attended some functions where we may have 5 wine glasses because each course is paired with a different wine. So just things like that as you go through life that you'll kind of like, don't get overwhelmed by it. There's a way to kind of make this manageable no matter where you're at. And we'll kind of go through that here in just a few minutes. Anything else you want to add to the overall place setting?
Just one quick trick that I learned over the years. Sometimes if you're at a dinner, as you can see, we only have 3 place settings on this table, so we have plenty of room. Sometimes if you're at a meeting or an event and you've got 10 people squeezed at one table, all the glasses just kind of form a ring. It's really hard to tell which drink is yours or which plate you're supposed to reach for, and everybody's kind of sitting there and hesitant. An easy way to remember it that I was taught is your drinks will always be on the right and your bread plate's on the left. Silly as this is going to look, do like this. This is a B to me. My bread is on the left, my drink is on the right. Makes it really easy to yeah, there you go. Thank you. So that's a really easy way. It's as you're viewing it. So again, make a B, make a D, and they'll come and go, okay, that's which one is in each place. That was always a really helpful trick for me when I'm at a big dinner, because I've been places where people are like, do you know which one's yours? Do you know which one's mine? I'm like, well, this one's to my right. I'm going to take this one, and then we all just follow that follow that pattern. So it's been really helpful and kind of silly, but comes in handy more often than you would think.
And that's kind of a segue to something we'll get to in a little bit, which is the host. So again, if Laura was hosting this dinner and she grabbed the wrong napkin, we're all going to follow her and grab the wrong napkin in that case, because she'll have my napkin and I'm going to need one. But we're going to kind of follow the host role in our etiquette as well, for kind of as we go through that segment. So we do have a lot more space here than we would typically have. Usually you're going to have about a foot to a foot and a half, or maybe a little less or a little more, depending on where you're at for dinner. But again, if you're doing one of the hotel banquet rooms, you're lucky if all of that squeezes in really closely there. And again, maybe you won't have everything that we have at this table. So in the center of this setting, we have a charger here, which is just a decorative piece, a decorative plate. We do not eat off this. We do not set our dinner roll on that or put our salad on that. That is just a decorative piece. And sometimes during one course of the meal, they may remove it. So if we were starting out with our actual dinner, we may just have a charger and then our soup is served, or our salad may be there. A salad may be preset or it may be served. Again, we would go to an entree and then back to dessert. So this is your dinner plate there in the middle. And then our soup bowl right now is just resting on top of that. So above the cup and saucer, this over here on this side, again, this is all of our drinking. Remember the D, this is all of our drinking, our coffee cup, iced tea, Coca-Cola, and our water goblet there. Okay.
Okay. So something that we don't have set out here right now, but Brian mentioned, is sometimes they will preset your salad. So for example, at an event, they may have the charger and maybe they have your salad preset right there. If they do, it's all right to start on that when they give you the instructions, but sometimes they may decorative, maybe the event program is there, or they have a giveaway that they're a favor that they're giving to everybody. There may be something else there. Well, so then where does the salad go? So if the salad plate isn't set at the center, then your salad plate will actually be set kind of over here. This is actually our bread plate, which will usually be placed there. And sometimes they'll have a separate knife for you. And we'll cover a little bit later why you need a separate knife for that. But so you could also have a salad plate here. If it is set to the side, it's fine to move it over in front of you to eat. You don't need to try to eat your salad over here. I've seen someone before try to shift and get the food there and bring it over to them. Put your food in front of you and make it easy is the easiest thing to do there. Brian talked about the different utensils. Again, we did kind of a simpler place setting, but you could have a lot more. The easiest rule of thumb is work from the outside in. If you're not sure, oh, well, I don't remember what's that spoon for? The first time you need a spoon, just get the one that's on the outside. Then it'll be taken away and just work your way in. So pretty simple, because it can get very challenging, especially if you're not familiar with having a 6 or 7 course meal and there are a lot more there. You don't want to be picking and trying to figure out which one's right. So,
and if you use something, again, at a nicer restaurant or a dinner, it can be replaced. So let's say you used the spoon, but there was just beautiful crouton that you cut inside there. So you wanted to cut it into 4 pieces. So you used your knife. Well, you're going to probably send your knife and your spoon away. So they'll bring you a new knife. So again, don't be afraid. If you need something else to operate your dinner, do that as well. So the knives and spoons are going to be located, again, we already said on the right. Spoons are going to be outside the knives, again, located in the order that you would need it to work from outside in. So the large spoon here is our soup spoon. So again, it may be on the far side out, next to the teaspoon for our coffee or our tea. And then the knife if there was another knife in there too, again, there could be more than one knife. If it's a serrated knife that's located in there, it's there to eat steak or a protein that may be there as well. Okay. Do you want to go ahead and check on those couple things there?
Sure. Okay, like I said, the people who are setting your place setting, they know what the menu is. They know the order of each item, each course. So they're going to put the silverware or the flatware in the order that you should use it. So again, that's why the good rule of thumb is just outside in. If they think you'll need a salad fork, a dinner fork, not sure what else, but say you need 2 forks. Say maybe there's something between salad and dinner, some kind of small little or something. They'll put a 3rd fork here. Just work your way from the outside in, because they're not going to put out just extra utensils just to have them. Each thing they put out because they don't want to make more work for themselves that's unnecessary either. Mm-hmm. So what's on the table is theoretically what you should use. Now, here's one that's always fun for me, because I'm very selective about what I'll eat when I eat out. There are times I don't want to eat one of the courses that they serve me. Well, you don't want to be rude to someone. So the good rule of thumb on that is just either skip using the utensil completely, and then the server can take your food away. The other thing you can do, because sometimes if people see you not using things, they may comment on it. Or if you're worried that you're going to lose track of which fork you're supposed to be using now, because, well, that smaller fork was supposed to be that one and I skipped it. What you can do is actually just take the utensil and just set it on that plate or bowl so that when they remove that course for you, they take that utensil away too. And it just keeps the flow going for all of that. And anytime, like Brian said, I don't know if you can see a little spoon here above, see a fork or a spoon up there, that one is going to be done as your dessert utensil. So if you see a spoon, then you know it's something a little softer, like a pudding, mousse, something up that. Fork probably means you're getting cake, maybe chocolate cake. But the one on top is always going to be designated your desserts.
And then again, if you're unsure of what to do, look to your host or your hostess that is going to help you through the dinner. Because again, they probably help select the courses and what's going to be served, so they're expecting what to have. You should always allow your host to start eating first. And then again, before anybody eats, wait for everyone to be seated at the table, and then again, watch the host. Okay, we'll go back and join you here at dinner. So as we're getting ready to prepare for our meal today, we want to make sure that we're maintaining a correct posture and, being upright, not slumping down or over our food. And like Laura said a little bit ago, we want to bring the food to our mouth, not our mouth to our food. So we don't need to go over here to that salad plate, but we should be just a few kind of inches away from where we're going to be consuming our food today. We're not going to put our elbows on the table. That would not be very nice to do. And we typically use American style eating, and there are a lot of different styles as you kind of go through some different etiquette trainings or even hospitality trainings. You're going to learn that there's all kinds of different styles of service. Typically, we use American style here, and we're going to eat our food with the fork in the right hand, okay? So that's where we're going to do that. You want to demonstrate cutting our food?
Sure.
Okay, so when you cut your food, you want to shift the fork to the left hand. Cut the food into a couple of pieces. So we're not going to cut the entire steak up into little pieces. We're just going to cut a couple of pieces of our steak off. Then you're going to set the knife down and shift the fork back to the right hand. And now you're ready to consume your piece of steak. Okay, so again, things to consider, not just for steak, but anything on your plate. You don't want to just like start out by cutting up your whole dinner and then going after it. So again, we're going to cut a few pieces, shift, eat, and then place back down, and then cut a few more pieces as we need that, okay? So we want to bring the food to our mouth in small, bite-sized portions, so that making it easy to chew and easy to manage. Always eat with your mouth closed. I can't tell you, that's probably a lot of our pet peeves, but please chew with your mouth closed. If you pause while eating, never hook your fork over the edge of your plate like that, okay? Keep the fork and knife on the plate. So again, as Laura finished cutting her steak, she left that knife on the plate. So she didn't put it back down on the tablecloth or somewhere else. She kept it right there on her plate.
And that's actually a good rule with any of your utensils. Once it's been used, once it has touched food, doesn't matter if it's been to your mouth or not. Once it's touched the food, it shouldn't go back on the table. There's always going to be some place, like I said, you can see I just kind of set my knife over the edge. Like when you use your teaspoon after you've stirred in your sugar, you can set it on your saucer, you can put it on the edge of your plate, but basically think about it this way. You don't want to intentionally dirty the tablecloth is always kind of the easy way to remember that. Pretend this was a white tablecloth. Any food I have on my utensils is going to get on there. So always find another place to set that utensil. And one other quick note is when you are cutting your meat, like Brian said, hopefully you'll be eating somewhere nice that the steak is nice and tender, but you'll have a serrated knife, like you said, if it's a protein. When you go to cut your meat, you don't saw your food like this. You should cut it like this. You always pull it one direction. If that wasn't enough to cut the meat, just go back and make another pass. If you have to do too many, there's probably something wrong with the steak, but you don't want to sit there and saw at it like this. Number one, it just looks really aggressive and it makes a lot of noise in most situations. Sorry.
No, that's a great point. Next, we're going to bring back our soup plate, our soup bowl, back onto our main course here, because this is always a fun one. Especially in the wintertime, soup can definitely be one of your courses. Sometimes it can even be substituted for your salad or for your first course. So as we're eating with our soup spoon, we're going to dip the spoon away from us. So we're going to go like this and then bring it back up into our mouth. Okay. So that way we're not bringing this towards us. We're going to scoop away. Okay. We need to sip from our spoon. Okay, we're not going to do that. And by all means, we're not going to bring the bowl up to our mouth and drink the soup. Okay, that would be a big no-no. And so let's say there's just that soup was so good and there's just a little left in the bowl. If you needed to slightly tip the bowl just a little bit, again, you're tipping it away from you and pulling that up. And then okay, but not towards us. And we would never remove the bowl and slurp that from the table. Anything else you want to add with soup? That's always a fun one.
I think no slurping soup. I think that covers most of it.
Well, you love bread.
I do love bread.
So I'll let you talk about our bread etiquette here. Breaking bread.
Okay, we don't have any bread. So in a group situation, chances are you're going to have the bread served in a basket. The server may not know who at the table is the host. So they're just probably going to hand it to a person, especially if you're at a round, there's not really a starting point or a stopping point. So if they hand me the bread, I'm really excited because I got the bread first, but I don't get to eat the bread first. What you're supposed to do is you grab, well, I say grab, sorry, I always want the bread. You have the bread basket, and then you're actually going to be passing it around the table. So you always want to pass it to the right. So you get the bread basket, which we're going to pretend I have, and then I would offer the bread to the person next to me. Now, occasionally that person will say they don't want the bread. Well, you still need to say, okay, we'll go ahead and just have them pass it around. So if you're the one who grabs the bread basket from either the server or if it's sitting on the table, you're the last one that gets to have the bread, which has caused some fun situations when I'm in a group that knows that rule, because nobody wants to grab the bread basket because they'll be the last one to get it. I always look at it as the sooner I get it going, the sooner the bread gets back around to me. And if you're in a situation like this, they're going to have enough bread. They know how many people are seated at the table. There's going to be enough for everyone. So don't worry but if it gets to me, I might not get any. And you should only take one piece of bread at a time. It can always make its way back around. And once it's been around to everyone, if a few minutes later you've had yours and you'd like another piece, you can say, would someone pass me the bread? At that point, you can have a second piece, but you should always let everybody have one piece before you have any, which sometimes is really hard because sometimes it's really good. So a lot of times the bread basket will have a napkin or some type of linen in it. So when you go to offer it to someone, you actually open it so they can see what you're offering them. So if I picked up that bread basket, I would actually just fold it back. You don't need to completely open it because that's partially there to also hold the heat in a lot of times for those rolls or bread so that you get that nice warmth that'll melt the butter. So you just get it, fold it back, and then offer the bread. Again, they should take it and it'll make its way back around to you. If for some reason someone didn't realize that it was being passed around and it stops, you can just say, oh, excuse me, could you pass that? You don't need to be like, excuse me, where's the bread? So it will make its way back to you. Okay, another really important thing is sometimes in the bread basket, there'll be a couple of different kinds of bread. We go to a lot of dinners where, you know, there might be one with sesame seeds on it and a wheat roll and a white roll. You only touch the bread, and especially now with COVID, this would be even more apropos. You only should touch the bread that you're going to eat. So if the roll that you want is underneath, if you need to use that napkin, kind of move one over, but your fingers should never touch someone else's bread. Only touch your own bread. Sometimes you'll get a partially cut loaf. I know they do that at Cheesecake Factory. You get that bread and it's hard because they've sliced it, but it's not all the way to the bottom. So how many of you just kind of grab it and tear off the piece you want? Well, now I've touched all of the bread that someone else wants. You use that napkin that's in the bread basket, put it over it to hold it so that you can gently tear off the piece that you want. And then if you do have a bread and butter plate, that's where your bread should go. Even if you plan to dip it in something that's on your plate, you should always set it there.
So what happens if there's not a bread and butter plate? Where do I put my bread?
No. No, you can just set it on the edge of your entree plate because that should already be down by the time that the bread's there. If it's not, sometimes they're still on the salad course when they bring the bread. You can set it on the edge of, basically whatever plate you have at that time, you can put it on the edge there. Don't set it on the table. Don't make a big deal. Don't try to hold it. Just set it on the edge and work around it at that time.
So sometimes when we've passed the bread and now there's butter. So sometimes we may have to pass the butter as well because there's little beautiful rosettes of butter on a plate. or a block of butter that we'd have to pass around. Sometimes the butter's already been issued to us in a sizable amount that's on our table here. So at that point, as we're passing the bread, somebody else may want to start passing the butter. So again, if you're going to take butter, take the amount that you need, just a small lump or a small pat of butter, but do not take a large scoop of butter and plop that on your bread and butter plate right here. So then as we're eating, we're not going to get our knife out and saw the bread in half or rip it in half. We're going to tear off a sizable amount, a bite-sized piece or two, and place it here and butter each little piece as we eat them. Okay, so again, we're not going to open this up and then slather that one, and bring that whole piece up and start eating. We're going to just tear off and eat sizable pieces, just like we did with our steak as well. So if it's going to make it to your mouth, and I think in any course that we're eating, if it's going to make it to your mouth, it shouldn't make its way back out to any other part of the plate. So again, whatever we're bringing up to eat, we should eat the whole thing. So again, we shouldn't be taking a big old piece of meat and just chewing off of it and putting our fork back down. We should only bring up what we intend to put into our mouth at a time. So there are sometimes disastrous things that happen at a dinner or at the dinner table. So we'll go through some of those, and we may have some more when we get to our Q&A period. But sometimes food can get caught in our teeth. And sometimes a little piece of broccoli or a little piece of steak or chicken. So we're not going to use our finger to dig that out. And we're probably not going to have a toothpick here at our place setting either, or the fork. We're just not going to sit in there and dig at it. So if you need to tend to something like that, you can just ask to be excused and then go to the restroom and take care of that, okay? So again, be mindful of what you're doing with your hands and things at the table, especially with COVID and what you're touching and things like that. We should just be very mindful of making sure that you're in your zone, in your area, and you're not touching your face or your teeth there. I always remember one thing too, like if you need to use the restroom or need to step away, like you don't need to ask people where they're going, like please excuse me and I can leave, you know, but we don't need to say, well, where are you going? You know, we don't need to, especially you never ask a lady where they're going. Let them go, do what they need to do, okay? If your fingers get food on them, don't lick them. I know it's sometimes that KFC chicken is finger licking good, but we don't lick or suck on our fingers. We can use our napkin to wipe them off. So just a little tip.
I'm laughing because I've seen people do that.
Oh, I know.
So,
it's good.
Just because the sauce was really tasty and you got some on you doesn't mean that you need to. No.
No. Don't. If you drop a fork or another utensil, pick it up if it's easy to do so. If not, ask for another. And again, it's okay to ask for another and they'll get the fork later. So don't worry about, again, making a production over something. Again, accidents sometimes will happen. So our next little piece is kind of our dinner conversation. You know, what do we talk about at the dinner table with our guests, especially if it's a job interview, there may be some questions, and sometimes there's just some small talk that needs to happen before we get into business. And so as we're waiting for our other guests to arrive or whatever it may be, what is that dinner conversation? So think of some pleasant topics that you can talk about that are relevant. It could be food, fashion, music, and then try to avoid topics that I'm going to call unpleasant. So those could be politics, religion, age, medical conditions, things like that that may be off-putting to some people. Know your audience, like know who's at the table and what is probably safe to talk about and not safe to talk about. We may have to talk about politics because there's a policy that we're discussing with the White House tomorrow, and we need to talk politically because it affects our business. So politics may not be off the table, or religion may not be off the table. Maybe my guest tonight is the father of our church or the pastor. And so religion may be discussed because it's in an environment where we have deemed it pleasant and safe to do so. So again, be aware of that and just be aware of those environments. Whenever we get to conversation, try not to sound too opinionated. You know, don't tell any controversial jokes. We should never correct another person. So even if we know that they said something wrong or not factually correct, Instead, we should offer a different perspective on things. We don't want to gossip about anybody that's not at the table. We want to be cautious about bragging. And again, our goal is not to be defensive here. So there's ways to spin things to make things positive. And if you don't have something positive to say, or you don't know if it's an appropriate topic to talk about, if you have to ask yourself that question, then we don't talk about it. Just like when we talked about the other day with Nick. If you have to ask yourself, should I wear this to dinner? If you have to ask, then you probably should pick out something different. So again, I think that applies here to dinner conversation as well. So Jeremy, will you take us back to the screen, and we can take some questions from our audience now. If you have anything, you can place that into chat and we'll see those pop up. Or if Rachel, if you see anything that's popped up in the chat that you want to ask, we are kind of open to some questions there. We may have a few other little things to interject as we kind of go through this.
All right, so Alexis Wade asked, how early in advance should you call a restaurant to make a reservation?
Well, some restaurants, could be booked out 2, 3, 4 months in advance. So you want to call as soon as you know that you need to make a reservation, because night of, if you're trying to call to make a reservation, you may not get in, especially on a busy night. Or right now, as we're making reservations, the restaurants may be closed. So don't just assume that you can get in somewhere. So as soon as you know that you need to make a reservation for a group, especially if it's a sizable group, you should make that reservation as soon as you know. Not all restaurants take reservations. So keep that in mind as well. Just because it could be a nice place or a nice establishment, they may not take reservations. So you may have to wait for 2 hours. So you may want to pick a different location for dinner as well. So great question.
And another thing to keep in mind with reservations is, say you make it a couple of weeks in advance, the number of people in your party may change. For example, say Brian and I were going to go out to dinner with Ms. Mills, and she decides she's going to bring her husband. Well, she'd let us know that. We need to let the restaurant know, because sometimes they have specific tables, like this table can only be set for 3 people. If we're going to bring an extra person or someone can't make it and you need to change those numbers, be sure to let the restaurant know that in advance too, not as you arrive, because they do their seating placements based on the reservations, and they may not be able to accommodate you. You think, oh, we're just adding 1 person, we can squeeze a chair in. They may not be able to accommodate. So make sure that you keep them up to date too with your reservation.
And some restaurants, like this restaurant here where we're having a nice dinner, our dinner service could take 2, 3, or even 4 hours. And so they're not going to be expecting to flip this table tonight, where if we go to Applebee's, we could be out in 45 minutes. And so they can get 3 or 4 services during that 4-hour period. So again, those little details can be very critical in your planning.
Absolutely. Another really good question was, if you have any special dietary restrictions, or if you can't eat something for religious reasons, how do you let them know in an appropriate way?
Definitely. I always say you can communicate to your host in advance. If I'm hosting something, I'll always ask, is there any special requests or special dietary needs I should consider? Again, at this restaurant, we may be ordering off a menu so we can modify something. Could I see a gluten-free menu? Do you have a vegan option for dinner tonight? I noticed that there was a sauce in that. Is that, how is that prepared? So it's okay to ask questions, especially if we're ordering something at a restaurant. And I think most restaurants have really adapted to some dietary restrictions and needs. So they may have a special printed menu already. They may already know, if it's a good restaurant, they're going to know, the server is going to know how things are prepared. If not, they'll go back and ask the chef or the kitchen. And they'll come back and say, actually, I didn't, the soup was made with a chicken broth, and therefore it's not vegetarian or vegan friendly. So with that in mind, may I suggest something else, or suggest this bean soup, or whatever it may be. So just know that it's okay to ask. And then again, if you have a dietary restriction, it's okay to communicate that to your host. If you've been invited somewhere to attend a function, you're most likely going to have to say yes or no, I'm coming or not coming. So you're going to have to RSVP in some way. So during that RSVP process is the best time to go ahead and say, oh, I would be delighted to attend. I want to let you know that I have a gluten allergy. And they're, oh, great. Because then they can get with their chef and make sure that this place setting right here, we know that that person is gluten-free. So we, from an event side and catering side, we've seen everything. I mean, there's a lot more than what you're thinking of gluten, vegan, vegetarian. latex allergies, so with a latex glove. There's people that have allergies to that. So as we're preparing food, we have to make sure that latex is not used in the preparation of food, cross-contaminations, things like that that we deal with our caterers often as well. Again, just making sure that things, just because there was a crouton on it doesn't mean we take it back and take the 2 croutons out of it and bring it back to you, because again, it would have cross-contaminated there as well. So always communicate that appropriately. You don't have to make a big deal out of it, but just appropriately.
And if you're invited to an event, or if you're going to a dinner, sometimes if you're going to a restaurant, chances are you'll get to order your own food. So like Brian said, you can ask for a special menu. Sometimes, like I know we've had company events where it's a preset menu. Everyone's getting the same thing. And usually, Brian's very nice to us, he'll usually get us some kind of steak option. Brian knows I don't eat steak. So Brian usually comes to me and says, would you be okay with, and he gives me 1 or 2 alternatives and I get to select. So again, just let your host know if you know that it's going to be a preset menu, and for example, you don't eat steak, you know, maybe that's not on the menu, but just tell them, oh yes, I'd love to come. And by the way, I'm not sure what the menu is for the evening, but I don't eat steak. And a good host is going to make accommodations for you.
And I would say keep that mindful too. We see all kinds of requests that come in. Again, we could be planning a 1,000-person dinner and we're going to see, I would like dessert not to have, be too chocolatey, you know, or too rich, you know, like preference over what is required from a medical or, you know, necessity versus a preference. So I would say don't go back and be like, well, I'm on a keto diet today, or I'm not eating carbs, so please don't serve any pasta. You know, again, I would just kind of change that a little bit. We have some people that have some severe medical issues, and they'll literally just say, I'll eat before I come, because I know no matter how you try to help accommodate my allergy or illness, you're not going to be able to. So that's totally fine as well. We have a lot of speakers and several people that just, again, are eating raw or eating certain things that, again, will not communicate that because they don't want to make a fuss.
All right, I think that was very helpful. There are a couple of similar questions here regarding approaching the check. So does everyone pay individually, or is it decided beforehand? And is it polite to offer to pay, or should you always leave it to the host?
Oh, that's always, anytime we talk about money, it always is the scary part, right? A lot of those things should be decided and communicated in advance. Again, part of it could be how I invited you to attend a dinner, or did I ask you to join, or that we're going to dine separately. So if you have a question, I would even kind of clarify that in advance too. Because it does get into a tricky conversation, especially at the table. And have a plan for the different scenarios as well. So maybe you do say, the check comes, oh, I'd be happy to split that with you. And then the host may say, oh, no, this was my treat. Then again, graciously accept that. So I'm probably the worst about it when the check comes. Sandy's probably laughing at me, but I'm always like, I'll take the check. But again, how do you communicate the expectation up front so that we all don't have that awkward kind of situation? So a lot of times if I'm going to host people for dinner or a lunch thing, I may have already talked to the host or the restaurant, the restaurant hostess or host, and say, this will all be on one check tonight, and I'd like to go ahead and take care of it. Here's my credit card. Don't even bring the check to the table. You know, I don't even want that kind of that interaction or that piece. So again, if it's planned for something like that, or if it's a catered event, if you're at a job interview, things like that, you may, again, if you've been invited somewhere, I think is probably the key there to consider, is that an invitation to dinner, therefore they're hosting me. But again, if you're unsure, I think just ask. And again, do what's comfortable for you too. A lot of times, I know I've read an article where, let's say we all ordered a different meal, but we're all going to be expected to split the check. But I just ordered a little salad, and she ordered a hamburger, and this person had lobster. Well, and 3 glasses of wine and something else. So that bill may be $150, but mine was only $15. So to split the check 3 ways wouldn't make the most sense in that scenario. So again, you can also communicate that in advance as you're ordering, like, oh, I'm going to be going ahead and take care of my meal tonight. I'd go ahead and I'll have the salad. So again, things like that, because that's what I wanted to do. I knew where my financial limitations lie in the evening as well. Especially as you're first starting out in your career, there's a tactful way to ask or to approach that subject. But again, you may not have a lot of money to go through a nice dinner program or presentation. So again, you've budgeted for different things like that. So just communicate what the expectation would be. I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
No, I think that's good. It's like Brian said, if you're not sure, just ask. I don't think anyone's going to be offended. And again, if I say, oh, would you like to come out and be my guest at this event? Chances are if someone, like you said, invites you or says, be my guest, that the anticipation is that they will then be hosting you and be paying for you. If they're not, like you said, if you're not sure, it's always safest just to ask. Saves everyone embarrassment later.
Or again, if we're going to go, you probably see more of the Dutch treat or something else. But again, when I've been invited to something like that, it's been communicated in that email or that invite that we'd each be paying our own.
All right, so I think we have time for a couple more. One of the ones that was asked in the chat is, should you eat the preset salad at a meeting as soon as everyone gets to your table?
Should be watching the host again at our table. Let's say it's a random networking event and there's a lot of people around the room and there really isn't a defined host at the table. So in that case, I typically wait for somebody to let me know it's time to eat the salad. So they're usually somebody that gets up and there may be a prayer offered or a reflection or just a simple greeting. Hey, we're all glad you're here. Please go ahead and get started on your salad as we start our program today. So there may not be a break between the salad and the entree and dessert because we're going through a program. So just be aware of that. And then kind of follow the table. If people have started to eat, then go ahead and start eating. If no one is, then you probably should wait. Unless you're the host or you're going to deem yourself as the host, then you could start eating. But if not, I would just wait for the other people to get started. Oh, let's go ahead and get started. And then if it's obviously everyone else in the room has gotten started, then you can kind of say, shall we go ahead and get started on our salads? Great, let me go ahead and pass the and kind of start that. That would probably be more of a casual business, monthly lunch and dinner type approach that you would have something like that versus a formal dinner that we would be going to.
All right, so I think there's one more that hasn't been addressed yet. Is it okay for left-handed people to use the fork and knife in their left hand?
So I'll take that one because I actually have had officer teams when we did this and we had some left-handed people. Technically speaking, you're supposed to use your right hand. However, if you're like me, I'm not very ambidextrous with my utensils. It's more acceptable to use the hand you're comfortable with and be able to smoothly and neatly eat than it is for you to try to be doing something with your left hand. Like I'm right-handed, so when I do it with my left hand, silly as it sounds, sometimes I have trouble figuring out how to hold the utensil correctly. And if for like soup or something where you might not have as good a grip, you can. Just don't make a big production of flipping your things around. Just, again, you want to be subtle with all of this because when you're out somewhere, it's not about people watching you eat. It's about trying to minimize kind of any distractions so you can have conversation and things like that. And also, don't do what I've just been doing and gesture with your silverware when you're talking.
I think another fun piece too, when we talk about like unusual things, like what if we have fried chicken for dinner and we have to eat our fried chicken, or there could be a few other things too, where you may have to touch your food. It could get a little messy. Again, doesn't mean that etiquette is off the table. You just may have to approach things differently a little bit. So yeah, you could sit there and cut your piece of fried chicken a little bit. But there may be a time, again, where, watch your host, but we're going to have some good fried chicken. And we're just going to go ahead and eat that as well. So again, I would wait for my host to say that is okay to do by what they're doing. But if they're not doing that, I'm not doing that. I'm going to cut my chicken and eat it that way. So again, be watching your host for that approval. But again, if we're at a company picnic, we're in a much different environment than we are here. We may not even have utensils. So again, know that sometimes, or if you go to medieval times, things like that, you're in a whole different environment. That's not necessarily throw all the rules out. You still want to use the rules appropriately in that environment.
And another thing that kind of goes along with that, it made me think when he was speaking, is if you're out at a restaurant where you get to choose your entree you're ordering from a menu, you might consider, how am I going to eat this? For example, I love spaghetti, but if I'm at a job interview, I'm not going to order something that there's a good chance I'm probably going to make a mess with it. So pick my second choice. Okay, I'll have grilled chicken. It doesn't mean you can't eat something you like, but be mindful of that. You're not going to want to order something that has a side of corn on the cob if you're at a job interview, because you don't want to have to pick that up and be trying to eat that in front of the people who are interviewing you. So again, now that only works if you're getting to choose what you're eating, but generally at a very nice dinner, if they've chosen the menu for you, they're not going to pick something that's going to put you in that awkward position either.
So we'll be glad to stick around for a few minutes after you wrap up, Rachel, and then we'll stop the record and answer anybody else's questions offline.
Okay, thank you all for your questions. A recording of this session will be available on our Virginia FBLA YouTube channel. Tune in at 3 p.m. tomorrow for our next Blue Blazer briefing presented by New River Region State Vice President Nicholas Maggard and National FBLA Southern Region Vice President Ethan Gazzulli. We hope to see Virginia FBLA members continuing to create a world of opportunity.
Wonderful. Jeremy,